Okay, so. All right, we're gonna talk about the whole Tookie. I'm gonna need it quiet too. So.
Hey, hold it, Finch, because they can't hear on the tape.
I want to make sure that those lines are hitting the red dot. See those two lines at the bottom? There. See how it's hitting the red dot?
Yeah.
When he speaks.
Okay.
Okay. Tookie got executed in December of 2005 with not a whole lot of physical evidence. Most of it was all circumstantial, and the key witnesses, the star witnesses to his case were mostly snitches. Can you speak on the individuals who were responsible for convicting Tookie and their backgrounds?
First, you had James Garrett and Esther Garrett, husband and wife, who were working with law enforcement, being involved in robberies and other sorts of criminal activity, then turning around telling the police. You had Alfred Cowens, who we have to remember was involved in the murder, but was given an out-of-state release, really out the country. He ended up going to Canada for his testimony. And what's interesting is Big James turned the gun in, the shotgun that was used in the murders, saying that Tookie had confessed to him about the murders. Then you had Tony Sims, who they say had a confession beaten out of him. They had no physical evidence, nothing other than snitch's word and a possible serial killer word as him committing the crimes.
Now, James Garrett was known to have already his own criminal background, his own criminal past. Why did the state rely so much on a guy who was responsible for his own crimes in the conviction of Stanley Tookie Williams?
Well, I think what it was, like I said, he was working with law enforcement because in 1977, Big Five in Inglewood had been robbed. And they just had built the Fox Hill Mall, and they had a hotel over there. And Big James was staying right over here on 84th and St. Andrews, and had set up a meeting with law enforcement to where everybody that went there that had been involved in the Big Five robbery thought they were going to sell weapons. But in return, they was going to be arrested by various law enforcement agencies. And this is very important because Big James was there, Tookie was there, Donald Archie was there, Samuel Watkins was there, the men that committed the robberies, and law enforcement were taking them in the rooms, video cameraing statements about how they were doing robberies. Now, Tookie never gave a statement, and they let Tookie go because they knew he wasn't doing no robberies. But Big James was doing robberies. Everybody went to prison except for Big James. Now, this is important, the Tookie case, because of the fact that some of the ammunition that was taken out this robbery in 1977 ended up in 79 being the bullet from this robbery that linked the shotgun that was up under Tookie's name to the murders. So we can infer that Big James would have had the bullets longer than Tookie, because Tookie didn't have nothing to do with the robbery, as opposed to Big James, James Garrett, having all the weapons. So when he took them to sell the guns, he already knew that nobody was coming back. So you can infer that he didn't turn in all the weapons. And that's part of the conspiracy or cover-up, I believe, that exists with James Garrett and amongst the other witnesses.
Now, everybody knew that Tookie bought a shotgun that under his name with his driver's license. Tell me, why did Tookie buy that shotgun in the first place?
Well, Tookie was running a boys' home in right behind Centennial High, and he had got shot. And he went and they shot up the boys' home that he was running, and he went and bought the shotgun to protect the kids in that halfway house, juvenile halfway house in Compton. And that's why the shotgun was up under his name. I believe he bought that in like 75, 74 around up in there, and that's why that gun was registered to him. It wasn't bought for no robbery.
When the police arrested Tookie, they went to James Garrett's house and they found the shotgun under his bed. Why was that such a big issue in terms of the trial against Tookie?
Well, I don't know where they found, because I haven't got that far in the transcript to know. You're saying they did find the gun up under Tookie bed, or I heard that Big James...
Under James Garrett's apartment. They found it at his place.
Probably because Big James was using it. Because Big James was committing murder robberies, and he was a suspect, which I think is also grounds to where Tookie should have at least been granted a stay until the information that I'm telling y'all, because it's never been heard publicly before, until I gave my testimony, because Big James was a suspect in at least 5 to 7 murders that law enforcement knew about, because he had also told on me about a jewelry store robbery. And Homicide came after they arrested me, and I was in the county jail with Tookie. This right after Tookie got arrested in around March, early 79. I was arrested summer 79, and another girl named Shirley Matthews was arrested before both of us behind James Garrett telling about criminal activity. So I think Big James might have been using the weapons, doing robberies, and that's why it was up under his bed.
Let me just check something real quick. Now, it seems that James Garrett must have had a special type of relationship with law enforcement if everyone knew he was involved in other types of crimes, and at the same time, he was also ratting out on other people, including yourself. What was this guy all about?
Well, he was older than us, and he had daughters that was our age. And what he would usually do, there was quite a bit of robbery going on in the city of Los Angeles, and they had groups or gangs of robbers. And his house was something like a team post, to whereas after you had one and committed a robbery or whatever, everything you had taken, you would usually take it over there and divide it up or leave it with him, because he was older. And so he played the role of not only a father figure as far as letting us have a little freedom in his house, but also he knew people who could buy stuff, hot items and everything else. And he was, like I say, he was committing robberies. Actually, we're gonna have a witness that's gonna testify that he killed somebody in his house and then threw the body, which was dumped on 105th. And we have true evidence of that, because we're gonna talk about at least 4 or 5 murders that we know he committed.
Now, do we know of any murders that he was charged for or convicted for where he was sent to prison?
Well, I know law enforcement came and talked to me after he told on me. They came down to the LA County and pulled out a map that had possibly 5 to 7 X's on it. Ojai, California. They had a couple bodies that were found in Ojai, California. A couple bodies found in 3 Rivers. A body that was dumped over on like 105th and something abnormally. I believe that's the one that he killed, a friend of his that he killed in his house. And a ring is missing off the... none of these murders are solved, but I know that a ring is missing off the body that was found on 105th, some type of Scorpio ring, a zodiac sign ring, valued at that time for $10,000. So I think law enforcement knew that they had a loose cannon on their hand, but they couldn't do nothing about it, or was trying to get enough evidence. Like when they asked me, do I know about him committing any of these murders? I said no, or to get some type of evidence to get him. But I think law enforcement knew that they had an informant that was had crossed the line.
Now, where's James Garrett at today?
He died of a heart attack.
When?
I think around 5, 6, 7 years ago. It's been a minute.
When he died of a heart attack, was he living still around here in LA?
When he died, I think they had moved out toward San Bernardino, Riverside County.
So he wasn't in jail or in prison for any of those
No.
crimes from the 70s?
He never
and
went
early
to
80s?
prison from numerous cases where he told and got arrested with people and never went to jail one time. But back in those days, we were young, and we knew we had an idea that he was working with law enforcement, but we really didn't know because there's never been no snitches, or we wasn't that type of crowd, and we never knew no snitches, so it was something new. And then when I found out that he had testified against Tookie, I called Earl of Foy Hutchinson and called Barbara Becknell, Tookie's right-hand lady, and they sent the attorney down, and I have a legal affidavit that I filed in the courts. I was one of the 3 witnesses that had filed an affidavit at the end of, just before Tookie was getting executed, that was ruled against, which I think they aired on.
How do you think James Garrett felt after Tookie was sentenced to death during the 80s? Because he was certainly still around here doing his thing after 1981 when Tookie was convicted and sentenced to death.
Well, I can't say how he felt because I don't believe a lot of people knew that he testified. Word wasn't on the streets that he testified. Like I say, that happened in '79. That's, 30 years ago, and I'm just not finding out he testified when I informed Tookie's name attorney and investigator, Michelle Gandy, that's impossible for him to be the main witness. He was a suspect in 70. He was considered a serial killer.
Now, what about the evidence that they gathered from Tookie after he was incarcerated in LA County Jail? Apparently they put a snitch cellmate in there to get information from him. What do you know about that?
Well, I don't know personally about that, but I know how that works. And that's one of the problems with our judicial system, to where you have too much assets or law enforcement can tell you information, then you'll turn around. It's called like pressure bust the pipe. You'll have a case where so much pressure to where you'll do anything to get up out of it, and that shouldn't have carried no weight either. Furthermore, those 2 witnesses that filed the affidavit, the affidavit to me was mute, because the court of law would have said they knew about this 25 years ago. So why are you coming now? As opposed to my testimony, which I believe the courts aired and denied in due process of the law, was new information, because nobody's never heard this, because I didn't even know all this transpired till then, and then I informed the courts. So like I say, it's the system that needs to correct it. Not only that, the death penalty period needs to be amended or abolished one way or the other, and that's what we're going to shoot for when we go for this pardon on Tookie.
What do you think about the whole idea that all you need is a witness that already has a criminal background as being a standard to sentencing someone to death and having them executed?
Well, it's not good, and let me show you why. Blackie, the one who was given an out-of-state release to Canada because he's a citizen of Canada, that's Alfred Cowles. Without his testimony, you got to remember they had a man that they knew was involved in the murders that they let go. So that ought to put you on alert, the juries or anybody. Why would they be letting a man go that they knew was involved in the murders to tell on a man that they suspected of being a murderer? And that should let you know that their words shouldn't be trusted, and that the police wouldn't have no evidence without for them to let a 4-time murderer go.
Now, Blackie actually testified against Tookie, right?
Mm-hmm.
He claimed that the Whittier murder at 7-Eleven, he was present or participated in it. What eventually happened to Blackie in terms of his sentence or his charge along with Tookie?
Well, Tookie got the death penalty. Tony Sims, which is Bam, got a life without parole, and James Garrett didn't get charged with nothing, and Blackie was given a out-of-the-country release, and he was taken to Canada, by which I heard he's in prison over there now 30 years later. So he was given a trip out the state for his role in the murders and testimony against Tookie.
Now, was Blackie personally known in the neighborhood before all of this happened?
Yeah, Blackie's an original Westside Crip, very reputable, very reputable. Actually, I seen him and Tookie a couple of days before they was arrested in the back of James Garrett yard lifting weights, and I walked up to him and I say, man, I don't know why y'all hanging out over here. I think this dude's a snitch, and y'all be careful. And a little while after that, I heard Tookie was arrested for the murders.
So some people already suspected that Blackie was snitching?
No, that James Garrett was. Okay. No, Blackie never had a snitch jacket on. Never. Very reputable cat until that incident happened.
How do a lot of people feel about Blackie and James that are still here in the neighborhood 30 years later?
Well, you got guys that if they would see him would probably do something to him. Basically, he got a bounty on him until the day he died if they run across him, because that's what real Crips do. So you got those that join gangs and you got those that started gangs. And it's a lot of guys that are inactive. And by the way, this could help the community, because how we gonna talk about saving lives and you have guys out here killing other blacks and robbing and all that. So we're gonna try to change that with that. But I think if they would see something, somebody would try to do something to him because he had that jacket on.
What was the neighborhood like back here in the mid-'70s when Tookie was out here and you guys were hanging out with James Garrett and hanging out at his house? What was the neighborhood in A-Tray like back then?
Like a teen post. Sniffing glue. They daughters, they had 3 or 4 daughters our age. We might party, but a lot of times we could hold our weapons over there, come back after robberies and give it to him. He has set up transactions to where to sell a gun, so we're sitting playing a robbery, and might meet over there to take off to go out and party to the farm or whatever. So it's basically like an open house.
You guys were doing all that hustling before the crack era blew up in the 1980s, where people was making millions. How was the money that you guys was hustling in the 70s? Was that satisfactory for that time period?
Well, when you're a robber, you're what they call immediate gratification. And this before cocaine was coming out, before it turned into crack in 1977. And before that, before they started making rock cocaine, which was started here in LA by Dexter Johnson, who was blowing up dope. The Tootie Reese's, the Suge Knights. A kilo of dope was like $52,000 a key. So we wasn't nothing but 17, 15, 14, 13. We wasn't into drugs, or couldn't even imagine no money like that. But we was robbing. We might, like for instance, one night we had a friend of mine that was graduating, one of the few that we ever seen graduate. First we went and robbed the tuxedo shop to get the tuxedos. Then we went and robbed the shoe store to get the shoes. And that's the type of things we were doing. But the money we was getting was to us a lot of money. It only costed $250, $500 for a car or something like that.
Now back in the 70s, the main drug that was used by a lot of young people was Sherm. What was that scene like coming up?
Oh, it was chaos. You had mint leaves being sold in pickle jars, selling it out of Church's Chicken. Actually, Big James had caught himself cooking some PCP and had brought an informant police with him, where he tried to set us up to go in with him. This when they were staying on 104th behind Zodi's off Crenshaw and Century. And he tried to start it. But when the Sherman come out, it started to open it up a little bit. It was a hustle, as opposed to back in those days, they were selling 4 fingers of weed for a dime, 2 fingers for $5, sniffing glue, drinking, kryptonite, and all that. The drug scene wasn't a big scene for the gang members.
So James Garrett was, and you guys were mostly making that money through the licks and robberies.
Robberies.
And was James Garrett pretty much the money guy around here during those days?
Nope. As far as what? What do you mean as far as?
I guess because you said he had all the hookups to sell the merchandise.
Well, he was, but you got to remember, everybody he was hooking us up with was police. So they had the money. It wasn't no, everybody he was turning people on to, he would be involved in it, take his cut up out of there, and then set them up and they turn around and get a call. We got numerous people here today that tell about instances where Big James did that.
Now, to a certain degree, he was an outsider, even though he lived over here and spent a lot of years, but he moved here from somewhere else, and he was never really a full-fledged member of A-Trade, right?
Well, no, he just was a sympathizer of A-Trade, but I heard that he came from out of Ohio, and then they moved right over here when we met him. They were staying right on 84th, and they just ran with A-Trades.
Now, during that early mid-70s period, it wasn't really no Crips beefing with other Crips. That didn't really start cracking until like 79, 80. What was the Crip scene like with the A-Trades in the 60s and the guys in the hundreds? What was that like on the West Side?
Well, before they went to A-Trades, 60s, hundreds, and all that, you only had 3 sets: West Side, East Side, Compton, and Watts was Watts, Georgetown, the projects. But all Crips were united in all fronts. Say the East Side, we was the West Side, Took and all us. That's everybody on the West Side from the 30s all the way down. Then you had the East Side, Raymond Washington, then you had Lil James, Compton, Boot Hill, and Compton. And we was all unified. And that's when the term Crips don't die, they just multiply. We never had no inner beef. And then later on, what actually started the breakup was people trying to be shot callers. And that's when the division came. See, Crips it's a street gang, as opposed to, say, a prison gang. In a prison gang, you got a chain of command. As opposed to a street gang, there's no one person that can tell a group of Crips what to do. Maybe it might be from A-Trade Gangster, it might be from the system, you might can tell them. But that wouldn't be unified with all the other Crips, because everybody now is on an individual basis, whereas to me, they really are in all in the same gang. Crips kill Crips, Bloods to kill Bloods, so colors don't play no role in this.
What do you think was a main factor that got the neighborhoods and the gangsters feuding in 79?
Well, I wasn't there for that, so I couldn't speak on that, but I can let you answer the ones that was there when it started later on in the interview. If they choose to answer it, they can answer.
So what kind of role did James Garrett kind of play in the neighborhood? It doesn't seem like he wasn't no shot caller or anything like that, but he was respected amongst people from this neighborhood at that time, though, right?
Well, it wasn't people. He got his reputation from hanging with me and my other homeboys and stuff like that, which made him reputable. But he was more like I said. We messed it with the children. We had free ring in his house, and he was liked until later on. Everybody started suspecting that he was an informant, and then people just started backing up because we wasn't sure. We had never experienced that before.
Now, right before Tookie was executed, there was a Crip guy named Jamel Barnes on TV saying that Tookie should be executed. What is it? How can another Crip speak out such against him during that period?
Well, to me, he probably thought he was going to get paid for being opposite of what he was saying, and he probably thought white folks are paid because he black or used to be a Crip and said this and that. But it's one thing about Jamel. I've been knowing Jamel. He never liked the Tookie. They used to lift weights together. They used to compete together. We'd be at the farm and they go to flexing and they'd compete. And he always was jealous of Took. So misery loved company.
Is a guy like Jamel that talks so much mess about his own people welcomed around certain neighborhoods like here?
Hell no.
No.
Hell no.
Actually, ain't nobody seen Jamel since.
Better not bring this motherfucker. Excuse me.
You can't come over here.
No, excuse me. I'm bullshit.
No. Keep it real. You can't come over here.
Now, when you got people like him out there, doesn't it kind of hurt the cause of trying to expose all the issues surrounding Tookie's execution?
Not really, because everybody have opinions. It ain't but a few people that really know what happened. So, like I say, everybody has an opinion, and it ain't whether he was guilty or not in this issue. The issue is, did he get a fair trial, and was there a cover-up? It don't matter about whether he did it or not. It matters, but in this case, it's whether his rights were violated. So, as it's a business. You got corporations that are buying prison, privatizing them, and it's it takes a very hard toll on your family. But one thing I learned in the 30 years that I did do in prison was a lot of guys in there think that they only hurting themselves when in fact they hurting their mother. They'll tell you, my homeboy Hunchy, I had to bury his dad when he was in prison. We miss them moments of not being with your family. As you have gotten older, when you're younger, you feel you live forever, you buck wild, it doesn't matter. But as you get older and reflect on it and you see life pass you by and see death in front of your eyes before you really know the meaning of life, you see the green in the grass, the brown in the dirt, you really see life and appreciate it and really know how blessed you was, because quite a few of us seen quite a bit of death.
Now, Tookie was in San Quentin from 81 2005. He did 25 plus years, almost 25 years on death row. You know a lot of people that are on death row. What do you think it's like being on in San Quentin's death row and living knowing that in the future they're trying to take your life away?
Well, like I say, it has to be a heavy burden on your mind. You're locked up 23 hours a day just about. Everything is done up under the eye of a guard or something like that. There's no privacy. One of the things when Tookie was getting ready to go to the execution, they let him shower an hour or two before he got executed. And the guard, he thanked the guard for letting him shower privately, because he had never showered without a guard there and all the time that he was incarcerated there. So it's very rough.
Now, right before Tookie was executed, I think the prison was sending out some propaganda information about Tookie just to make sure that the governor would make sure the execution went through. One of the rumors that was coming out all of a sudden was that he was the leader of the Crips and that he was still calling shots from San Quentin, although every call a death row inmate makes is recorded and monitored. How was that propaganda able to become so powerful in the minds of the average person into wanting to execute Tookie?
Well, a lot of people had already made up their mind or heard propaganda like that, and really don't know the system or know the rules of gangbanging or being that or know about the Crips. There is no one leader of no Crips. There's no, like I said earlier, there's no one man that could tell the Crips, oh, we gonna do this. It's on an individual basis. And people choose to believe what they want to believe, because Tookie was up under, there was so much pressure. You have to remember the climate, tough on crime. The governor's hands were tied behind him wanting to run for president, and I think these factors played in the decision, as well as the propaganda. Like, for instance, when the 3 Strikes law was on the agenda to be amended, and the governor came out and said it would release thousands of violent and serious criminals. That was propaganda, and it was a lie, because 3 strikes only affect you when you have a minor offense. That's when it turns a minor offense into a life sentence. Whereas opposed to anybody that would go up under the 3 Strikes law with a violent offense, he was eligible for a life sentence anyway up under the Richmond criminal law. So a lot of times you have people that say propaganda and there's nobody that stand up to dispute it. I hated that I was in jail on both those issues, because I went right to the governor's door, and actually I'm going back to his door now.
Now, one of the things that didn't really come out a lot prior to Tookie's execution was that he did not have a disciplinary strike on his folder in 15 years. Is that a testament to him changing and him really reevaluating the future course of his life?
It's very hard being affiliated or being just a model prisoner, inmate, as opposed to a convict. Inmate is just hard to go without getting a write-up period, so it takes a lot of discipline. But this is how the board will use that against you when you go to the board. If you go to the board and you messed up, they deny you parole on a life sentence. And then if you would go without having any disciplinary reasons, they would say you manipulating staff. So it's a damned if you do and damned if you don't. But usually, like my last 10, 15 years in prison, I didn't get in any trouble either, because you mellow out, you become a mellow prisoner, as opposed to when you first come in, 18, 19, before a day for day come out where you can kill somebody. It might not get but a year, but you can kill somebody, drop, which they were doing, the Mexican Mafia, because a lot of people don't know what the Crips went through at an early age in prison, fighting the Mexican Mafia, the BGF, the Ann Brotherhoods, the Muslim. Here it is, you got 19, 18-year-olds coming from the streets for doing harm to black, and you're just coming off the civil rights. So it's a very volatile period during the late 70s up to almost the 90s.
So during the 70s, when the very first Crips were getting arrested, they were obviously outnumbered. They ain't like today, a Crip can walk on the yard and they had no problem. But in the early 70s, when you have all these other groups, were they the targets of animosity from these other prison groups?
They was targets of attacks. It was so bad in Tracy, you had to shower with your clothes on and carry a book around your waist. During that time, like I said, you couldn't get that much time. You could kill somebody, but they didn't have no snitches. Wasn't nobody gonna come to court to tell you an incident that happened at YTS when I was 17. Jose Trejo got killed. We was watching the Super Bowl, 1977, Denver Broncos and Dallas Cowboys. Everybody else had 1-8. Jose Trejo was sitting right next to me right here. One Mexican grabbed him from around the neck with a guitar string and wrapped that around him. Two more jumped over the seats and held his arm down. And all we did, it was me, Puff from Hoover, Troy, Black, Tyrone Shows, Thaddeus, we all sitting right here. The man who getting killed sitting right here to my side. We never moved. And I noticed every time they hit him, when they pulled out from his neck, there's a big block of blood. So then, back then they had counselors that was working at YTF. They ran in there to break it up. They ran them out to where the counselor slammed the door. They went and turned the television down. And then after they killed him, they turned the TV up and said, "This loud enough for y'all," and went and sat in the back. But to show you how it was no telling, when we was taken to court to go testify, we said we didn't see nothing. And that was the end of it. But those are the type of cats occur. You had guys that was killed, you heard of Eula Love that was killed in over the water thing. She had a nephew that was a twin that was in the shoe program with me. And we had told him to stay off the gates in the prison because they were spearing him. He came out of cell, he got speared, he got killed by the jail. So they wasn't talking back then. It was basically on site it was on. And that went on for 20 years.
Now, Tookie was the first gang member to be executed, but after Tookie's arrest, there's a bunch of other guys that are on San Quentin's death row. They should be having dates coming up soon. Is it going to be, within the next, I guess, 5 years, a bunch of Crips and Bloods that caught their cases in the early 80s soon to be executed?
Yeah, because they appeal processes fit a halt. That's what happened with Tookie. He couldn't go no higher. Every death row inmate gets his case appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court of the United States, as opposed to a lifer or a determined sentence, somebody that has a set date. Actually, a lot of people don't know. You only get an attorney at the first level appeal, which is the state level. Then after that, you would have to fight the judicial system on your own, which is very hard to do when you're fighting a system that has all the money, as well as attorneys that went to school, and there's no way you'll win. So what's going to end up happening is, what's going to be big business in the California state prison is the graveyard, because a lot of men are getting at the edge of where their dates are coming up, and a lot of executions going to take place. I think we have 365 inmates on death row, as well as those that are sitting in the county jails or across the United States that are waiting to get sentenced to the death, as opposed to Virginia, you might get executed in 4 or 5 days. Los Angeles, California takes 20, 25 years.
Now, if you had an opportunity to speak with the governor about the death penalty and Stanley Tookie Williams case, what would you tell Schwarzenegger?
I would tell him that it's like this. You can either have the death penalty, but if you do, make it to where anybody, because it's certain crimes, to be eligible for it. If you're going to have the death penalty, make it to where if you get found guilty, everyone and all get it. And that's fair. Then everybody will know the rules when they go into doing whatever they do, that if you do this and you get caught, then you get it. But as the way that is presently stand now, I would tell him he would need to hope and amend the death penalty, put a moratorium out on them like they did in the Illinois, the Chicago 10, or turn around and abolish the death penalty, period. And that Tookie Williams case should be granted a pardon on the new testimony that I have and the evidence that I'm bringing forth.
Do you think that that's a reality that could happen within the near future, whether it's Governor Schwarzenegger or a new governor that comes in to put a moratorium on death penalty cases in California?
Well, I think that we've seen to where we've had quite a few innocent people that have not been have been exonerated from being on death row 20, 15, 20 years. Then DNA, the technology of DNA has released them. So we see that there is a flaw in the system. If you take just one innocent person of life, that ought to be enough to where the death penalty should be abolished.
Have we had anyone on California's death row had their sentences commuted to life?
Yes, we got C-Dub, which is on the Alexander murder with Fee. He just was gotten off, released off death row and received life without parole. We have Lavelle Frierson, who was the first one to get the death penalty in '77 when it was reinstated to where you could get executed. I heard that he's off death row. We've had inmates who've had their sentences commuted. And Chico, we got Chico that had life, and he got his. He's off death row also.
So in terms of the whole case against Tookie, what are some of your final thoughts for people who don't take the time to dig deeper and find out information that they would not normally hear from their local media?
I think the public should first weigh all the evidence from a prosecutional standpoint and from the information that I've seen, or not heard, but seen and witnessed from my mouth, my eyes, and other people as to the character of James Garrett and the witnesses, all that were involved as far as the Stanley Tookie Williams trial. And that I think, I said it again, I think we have enough evidence and enough testimony to where a cover-up occurred in the Stanley Tookie Williams trial, to where it's law enforcement purposely withheld evidence that could have exonerated him or created a reasonable doubt.
A lot of people weren't impressed when Tookie was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, because they said that anyone could get nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. But how many other death row inmates have you ever heard of being nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize?
None, but not only does it mean something, and it does mean something, because look at all the people who haven't been nominated. And that go the same way, it just depends on the situation. Like for instance, look how many people, out of all the people in the world, that got to be one of the worst luck you can have, is to end up on death row. Out of all the things you can do in the world, you turn around and kill yourself. That's when it does mean something. And it was an honor for him to be nominated. We were all proud of him. None of us been nominated or even thought about being nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, but up under the circumstances, it's a sad thing that that's what it took to open up your eyes to the death penalty, the death of somebody. But you know, we've seen a lot of death, and one thing I've learned, that most deaths usually have a message in it, and whether you read and acknowledge what the message is, you'll never get it.